Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the first talk on World Usability Congress 2019. Today we're going to talk about UX in an agile world. My name is Pitsch. I direct user experience and quality assurance at a company called eTrusted in Cologne, Germany. You may be more familiar with our biggest brand, Trusted Shops. I've spent the last years together with UX teams, leading UX teams, and trying to harmonize user experience design and a regular Scrum workflow so that both work together and no one is the real bottleneck. This is an update. I've been here last year with nearly exact the same talk, only with a year less experience and quite a few lessons that we've learned over the course of the past month that I'm going to share with you today. To get started, who of you was here last year who has seen this talk? 3 hands? Okay, not much people to prove me wrong. That's great. Who of you is working in an agile team? A lot of hands are raised. Who of you believes that you have managed to get user experience design and UX and agile development working good together? I'd love to get all of your feedback. Join me afterwards. All right. Welcome. No problem. Let's start. This is an update. We're going to go through the slides of last year with a couple of more. And we're going to start with a history lesson, just to get us all on the same page. What are we talking about? Back in the days before Agile, things were working in the waterfall model. There were defined processes, there were specs, a design phase, implementation phase. Things were released and afterwards maintained. And the problem with a waterfall development model is you don't look back, you don't really evaluate, you don't communicate that much. Things are handed over and then forgotten, and the creativity gets lost, and you realize your errors at the end of the process, not mid-process. And I've seen many hands raised when talking about are we run in agile development. It's not that far away. That is from end of 2017, where the German employment agency dumped a 60 million project after 4 years in the work because they realized they missed the critical data point, and implementing it in the software afterwards was just not possible. But we at Agile, right? We know Agile is the way, and we're doing our analysis, and then we're planning stuff, we're designing it, we're putting it in development, and then we're testing it, and we're going all that circle. And most likely, many of you are doing it in the Scrum way. It's basically the recipe for Agile. You have your product backlog with your ideas. During sprint planning, they are planned in a sprint, and the ideas in the sprint, the stories in the sprint are then worked on in a sprint that is usually 1 to 4 weeks, and on a daily basis, you come together and talk about what you have done and what is going good and what is going wrong, and at the end, you have a shippable increment, right? Something that is shippable to the customer and that produces customer value. And then you look back at reviews and retros and stuff like that to evaluate what you have done. And the great thing about Scrum, if you do it by the books, is the entire team works on the same focus. They work on the same sprint goal. Everyone on the team needs to work towards the goal to make it happen. And this is exactly one of the parts where there are a lot of pitfalls combining with UX design. And now this is one of the first updates to the talk. I don't want to talk about UX design. The reason is, whenever I talked about UX design with our developers, with our product designers, with our product owners, they were like, okay, but that's your business. You're UX design, we're development. And that is one of the fundamental problems in that harmonizing these two. So we started to talk about product discovery, not product design, not user experience design, just product discovery. And we found this nice little quote that says, product discovery is a process that helps us make sure we're building something that is not only usable, but also useful. So it's not about beautiful interfaces, it's about good user interfaces. And when we started talking to our developers and to the stakeholders about product discovery, not UX design, we realized that in their minds, UX design was done by UX designers, obviously, as development is done by developers. But product discovery can be done, or is done, but the entire team. Everyone's involved. So by just switching out the names for exactly the same thing, we came to the same page and had a whole different base of discussion. For us, product discovery means that every story in the sprint backlog, every story in our backlog needs to be discovered. And that's not only about UX. We discover all kinds of stories, right? We discover API architecture. We discover how we're building stuff, how we're communicating stuff. Every single story needs to be discovered. So UX design is just part of the process. It's just part of the things. And discovery for us answers mainly three things. If an idea is valuable, if it's usable, and if it can be built, if it's feasible. So at the end of the discovery, we want to have the ticks on all three of them and know we are moving in the right direction. So I've updated the slide. We're talking about pitfalls with product discovery. First of all, to have a great product in the end, you need to have a concept at first. You need to know where you're heading. You need to know the big picture. And if you're moving along in 2-week sprints and only concentrating on the next 2 weeks and moving iteration to iteration, you might get to a lost big picture. Another problem, if you really want to work in Scrum and you want to work on the concept, is that not everyone in the Scrum team works towards the sprint goal. Because some of the people, product owners and UX designers, will work for something in the upcoming sprints because they have to do prototyping, usability testing, get users on board, get stakeholders on board. All of that happens before implementation, before development, so they're not working towards the sprint goal, or they're working towards the sprint goal and the developers don't. And if you really want to do it in the same sprint, you might say, okay, let's do just the minimum viable user experience design that we can do, and then we're going to develop it and ship it out, and that's the worst thing you can do. Because while users are used to get a small feature set that works good, they do not accept a feature set that does not work good, that has a bad user experience. For our definition, product discovery delivers two things. The first thing is what we call feature blueprints. It's a conceptual document that includes everything we need to describe the big picture. It basically is, we're trying to imagine if we would have unlimited resources and could build everything right now, finish tomorrow, release tomorrow, how would it look like? What is the big picture that we would build tomorrow with unlimited resources? And we're imagining this big picture, and then we're taking the step back and say, okay, we don't have unlimited resources. What is the first version that we can really build? What is feasible? And then we have our big picture, the visionary feature that we would build. And we also have the first iteration, the idea of the first iteration. And then we can build upon this iteration for iteration. And we see that what we come up with in the end is not the feature we envisioned. Not at all. It's always different. But we know where we're heading. We always know this is what the idea was in the first place. We're not just looking at the small piece, but at the big picture. And the second thing that comes out of the discovery is story-based discovery. The stories in the product backlog and the sprint backlog needs to be discovered to be ready for the development sprints. So this is about the real design. This is about engineering decisions, all the things you need to do before you take a story into your development. And we've spent a couple of hours to find the right workflow. We've tried a lot to get all of this working together, to get user experience designers in the Scrum teams working on the sprint goal, not working on the sprint goal. We've tried a lot. We've tried Agile Waterfall, like the UX designers would concept something with stakeholders and the product owner, and then it was handed over to the developers to develop it. And this is simply Waterfall. It's a really short one, but it's a waterfall, so not what we wanted. We've tried UX as a service. Basically, our UX team was a satellite team that was available whenever our development teams needed help. So they just could say, okay, in this sprint, we need UX design for that, and UX design would jump in. Problem is, they don't. Because there are a lot of developers, especially backend developers, who don't really have an idea about good user experience design. It's just not their business. And that's totally fine. This is why there are UX designers. This is why there are specialists in the team. But you can't demand from someone who has no clue about good UX design to raise the hand when it's needed. So UX as a service for us just didn't work out. And the next thing, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people in the room will disagree with that, but lean UX didn't work out for us at all. Because we wanted to strive for the big picture and not take the next assumption and try this out and take the next assumption and try this out. But we wanted to go towards the big picture that we envisioned with our feature, with our product. And lean UX just wasn't the right tool for it. Maybe we did it wrong. But in the end, we came up with a magic formula. Exactly. It's not magic. The problem is that this formula is real hard work to implement. It creates a lot of friction in your team. You need to communicate a hell of a lot to get it done. And you will see that a lot of people don't understand it in the first place, and you have to tell it over and over again until they realize that this change in behavior, change in the way products are developed, really ends up with better products with a smoother development flow. So this is our magic formula. We're running a dual-track Agile approach in staggered sprints, and we're utilizing design spikes. Any questions? No. Let's dig a bit deeper into it once the photos are taken. First of all, we're doing dual-track Agile. That's pretty simple if you think about it. Right now, most of you will most likely work somewhere here. So you have an Agile approach, you're doing most likely Scrum, and you work on that Scrum track and you're delivering stuff. Right? The problem is everyone works on the same sprint goal, so UX design just doesn't have the right place. So we're calling it as it is, and we say we're now going to have two tracks. We're going to have a discovery track where things are, well, discovered. And we're having a delivery track where features are delivered. Key to that is that we accept that we cannot work towards the same sprint goal, so we simply add another sprint goal. And we make transparent what was not transparent before, the work of the UX designers and product owners and everyone who worked in discovery, by adding discovery stories to the sprint board, something that wasn't there before. And one really important thing is also that we've included UX deep in the team. It's not a UX team and a development team, it's a cross-functional team where our UX designers are essential parts of the teams, joining any meeting, any refinement, any tech refinement, reviews, plannings, dailies, and so on. The separate sprint goals help us to define two sprint goals that we're striving for. So again, everyone in the team is working towards a sprint goal, but they're sharing two. We're putting everything we're doing on the board, and we're calling it discovery stories. Why are we calling it discovery stories and not simply add discovery stories or tickets or tasks to the stories we already have? Because not every story will finally end up in delivery. There are a lot of stories that just drop out because we discovered that we should not build it. And if you would do it in the same story, the story would not be finished by the end of the sprint, because just the first part is finished by the end of the sprint, which means you get sprint scope changes on a regular basis. And the funny thing about this is, if you really look closely, most development teams are already doing this. They're just not talking about it. They call it refinement. The refinement is the meeting where the developers and the team comes together to decide if a story is ready to be implemented in the next sprint. And if we now think about what I've said before, we can see that the discovery just fulfills the definition of ready that we have. When is a story ready to be delivered? When is a feature, when are all questions answered so that we can take it on the delivery track? And on the other hand, delivery obviously fulfills the definition of done. When is the work done so we can release it to our customers? That is dual-track Agile. To make dual-track Agile work, we had to take an approach that we call staggered sprints. And if you're not familiar with the word, staggered means things are arranged so that things happen at different times. They're shifted. So we take our discovery and delivery track, and we're envisioning this, projecting this for 3 sprints in that example. During the first sprint, we're doing product discovery for the next sprint on the discovery track. It's important to understand this is not what UX designers do. This is what the entire team does. We also need our developers in the discovery phase because we need their know-how. We need their ideas. Everyone discovers this. And of course, in that sprint, delivery is not bored. They usually do a lot of stuff. You don't implement this process from sprint 0, so they're already doing things. So in sprint 1, we're discovering what we want to do, what we want to deliver in the upcoming sprint. Discovering means wireframes, mockups, conceptual documents, prototypes, click dummies, conducting user interviews, everything. Up until the point that we agree that the story is ready to be implemented. No one in the team should have open questions anymore. Everything should be, to that point, answered. We know how it's going to look like, we know what it's going to feel like, we have an idea how we're going to build it. So at the next sprint, we can take this information and put it into delivery. During that sprint, sprint number 2, we're also discovering for sprint number 3. But right now, we have something that we call UX consultancy during the running sprint. The reason for this is that you cannot plan everything ahead, and you should not plan anything ahead. You should not plan everything in your discovery for the last detail. For example, we never look at animations or micro-interactions in the discovery because it's always different in the browser, it's always different on the device. You can plan hours and you can create prototypes for any animation. If you have it in your hands, if it's working in the application, it's just looking different. So we simply ignore it. We say, yes, we want to have an animation. But for the fine details, we always do it in the delivery sprints. And we have our UX designers sitting together, pairing with our developers to create these micro-interactions, to define the last details. We have our content managers defining the right content, the micro-copy, during this delivery phase. And then we look at sprint number 3. We discover for sprint number 4 in the upcoming sprint. We consult on the given sprint, pair with the developers, and there's something new to this process. We look back. We evaluate and track what has been done before. Again, conducting user interviews, measuring KPIs, looking at Google Analytics, looking back, reviewing what has been done and if we did a good job. And after 3 sprints, this all repeats. The UX roles in this staggered approach, where we just shift the sprints and shift the sprint goals so that we're doing things for the upcoming sprints, but we're doing it transparent and we know what we're doing. Our discovery for the upcoming sprints, consulting on the given sprints, and the evaluation of former sprints. Now, if you implement this process, you will see that this all shifts. You will have sprints where you only discover stuff. You will have sprints where you discover nothing new because you have to evaluate and conduct user interviews and design sprints. And you have sprints that are super consulting heavy for the UX designers, where they spend most of their time on the desk of the developers, helping them, joining them to finalize the UX design. So this all shifts. It's not 1/3. That are staggered sprints. But what are design spikes? In Scrum, if you do it by the books, you always have the problem if you want to work towards the sprint goal and everything you deliver is an increment that is shippable to the customer. There is no way to test things out. There is no way to just play around with stuff, create waste. And because they saw it, they invented spikes. And the spike comes into place whenever you want to test something out, try something out, build a first mock-up, build a first prototype of something. Whenever you're not clear what the result will be, or you are clear that the result will not be shippable to the customer, because it's mainly for your own know-how and for your own information. And we are hijacking this and we're calling it design spikes. And we use it for uncertain UX challenges. We're using it for everything where we don't really know what the result will be, or where we know that the result of what we're doing is an answer and not an increment that we can then give to a given other sprint. For example, trying out a new prototype tool, or trying out a new workshop method, conducting a user interview in a different way. Something that we have to train, something that we have to learn from, without really generating something that we will put in the next sprints directly. And as with spikes in development, we're time-boxing this. We're time-boxing this to make clear how much time of the sprint will we spend for this. And there's always a given question to a design spike, so we never start by saying, okay, we're going to try something out. We're always trying to find a given question that we can answer during the design spike. And a good example for that, for example, is the Google Design Sprint. You have a week, you have a defined team, you have a defined set of questions that you're going to answer, and the result of the design spike is a tested prototype that will most definitely be waste 2 weeks later because it's put together within a couple of hours. And that's totally fine. Perfect example for a 1 week design spike. So we're using design spikes for everything that is uncertain or delivers something that will not be for the next couple of sprints. That is our magic formula. Not magic at all, hard to implement. It delivers a lot of friction, but I can recommend it to every one of you to try it out because for us at least it works. But we've learned a lot of stuff while implementing it, while testing it with different teams and different companies actually. And I want to share some lessons that we've learned. The first is, yes, you have dual track. You have 2 tracks. You have your discovery track and your delivery track, but you should put them on one Agile board. And the reason is, as long as it's not on the board, people will not look at it. And if the designers have the discovery board and the developers have the development board or the delivery board, they're not looking at the other one. On the other side, this means you have a really wide board with a lot of columns. So that's something to manage. Going in discovery and then delivery, putting it on 2 tracks, always tends to go in the direction of the Agile waterfall. So you always have to find the right pace to discover to the point that it delivers answers, any answer to the questions you already know for the story, but not plan every detail. Not believe that what you've done in the discovery will end up in the product 100%. Because there's a lot that you, again, discover during implementation. How things work, what is really feasible, things about performance. Things always look different in the browser. So keep open to that and don't fall into the Agile waterfall. And I think the 2 most important lessons that I've learned while implementing that with different teams is every team is different. While this will work for us, it might not work for you in the same way. It's the same reason that Scrum by the book works for some teams and not for others. It's basically a blueprint that you can adapt, or you have to adapt, to work with your team. Please don't believe that this is simply adaptable and works for everyone. And be aware of the context switch. That's something that we learned the hard way. If you want your team to switch context during the sprint from discovery to delivery, back to discovery, back to delivery, and work on both parts because both parts are now part of the 2-week sprint, you will lose some traction during the first couple of sprints, because the switching of context and now thinking about, okay, now I'm in discovery mode, also the developers, that needs training. And it's not really easy to get there. In conclusion, this approach really helped us to get product discovery and product delivery on the same page, to get them working closely together, to have our developers, especially the developers, being closer to product discovery and then joining product discovery, not relying on the UX designers doing the heavy lifting and then complaining that it's not what they thought of. And it's also a great way for us to get our UX designers closer to the developers, because they, by definition, pair in the delivery sprints, defining the final details. And I just can recommend it to each and every one of you. Give it a try. Try it out with your teams and send me your feedback on what you've learned. Thank you very much.